The phone slipped from Marcus Hale's hand and cracked against the marble floor. He didn't move to pick it up. He just sat there, alone, in a chair that cost more than most people's cars, staring out at a skyline that he owned, pieces of buildings, towers, entire blocks of a city that pulsed and glittered below him like a living thing. It was 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes to midnight, and his hands were trembling. Not because he was afraid. Not because something was wrong. His hands were trembling because something was about to go very, very right, and he could no longer remember why that mattered. He tried to picture his mother's face. He got nothing. Just a vague shape, a warmth without a name attached to it, like trying to remember a dream that had already gone cold. He pressed his fingers to his temples and breathed. The clock on the wall ticked. 11:59. Marcus Hale, the wealthiest man alive, closed his eyes and waited for midnight, and tried, desperately, to feel something. 3 years earlier, Marcus was sitting in a different chair. A cheap one. The kind that left marks on the back of your thighs if you sat in it too long. He was in his apartment, one bedroom, one window, a view of a parking structure, eating instant noodles at his desk and refreshing his investment portfolio like it owed him an apology. He was worth about $400,000 on paper. Comfortable enough. Not enough. You're always doing that, his best friend Daniel said from the couch, not even looking up from his own laptop. Refreshing it won't make the numbers move. It might, Marcus said. It won't. One day it will. Daniel laughed. A real laugh, warm and unguarded, and Marcus smiled at his screen without turning around. That was their rhythm. That was enough, back then. The night it started, Marcus woke at midnight for no reason he could explain. No alarm. No noise. Just his eyes snapping open in the dark, and an odd electric feeling in his chest, like the air had shifted. He reached for his phone out of habit, opened his portfolio app, and stared. His net worth had doubled overnight. He sat up so fast he nearly fell off the bed. He refreshed it. The number held. He called his broker at midnight. The man picked up, barely conscious, and confirmed that yes, the positions were real, the gains were verified, and no, he had no explanation for how it happened so fast. Marcus hung up and sat in the dark for a long time. Then he laughed, and the laugh echoed around his small apartment like something that didn't quite fit the space. It happened again the next night, and the night after that. By the end of the first week, Marcus Hale was worth $12 million and had told absolutely no one except Daniel, who sat across from him in a coffee shop with his mouth open and both hands wrapped around a mug he had completely forgotten to drink from. "You're serious," Daniel said. "I'm serious, Marcus. That doesn't make sense." "I know. Then how?" "I don't know, Daniel. But it's real. It's real and it's happening every single night and I'm not going to question it." Marcus leaned forward across the table, eyes lit up, voice low and urgent. "This is it. This is the thing. This is what I've been waiting for my whole life." Daniel looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. "Then I'm happy for you, man. I really am." They clinked their mugs together and Marcus felt, in that moment, like the luckiest man on earth. Not because of the money. Because of all of it together, the friend, the warmth, the morning light coming through the coffee shop window, the feeling that everything was finally beginning. He didn't know yet that this was the last morning he would remember clearly for the rest of his life. The first thing he lost was small. He went to call his sister on her birthday and blanked, completely and without warning, on the date. He stood in his new kitchen, a new apartment, a much higher floor, and scrolled through his phone looking for her birthday like he was searching for a stranger's information. He found it. He called. She laughed when he admitted he'd almost forgotten. "Almost," he said, laughing back. Key word. He didn't tell her that he hadn't almost forgotten. He had forgotten entirely. He filed it away under stress. Under busy. Under the 1,000 small excuses that people in motion use to avoid looking too closely at themselves. The money kept doubling. By month 4, Marcus was worth over $1 billion. He moved into a penthouse. He bought a second one. He started acquiring companies the way other people acquire hobbies, quickly, enthusiastically, without quite finishing the last one before starting the next. His name was in every headline. His face was on every cover. And quietly, without ceremony, the losses continued. He forgot the name of the restaurant where he'd had his first date, a small Italian place with candles on the tables and a waiter who mispronounced everything on the menu. Then he forgot the date itself. Then the woman entirely. He found a photograph of her in an old box and stood holding it for a long time, waiting for something to surface. Nothing came. She looked like a pleasant stranger. He set the photo down and went back to his calls. Daniel noticed before anyone else did. Of course he did. They were having dinner, or rather, Marcus was eating and Daniel was watching him with an expression he hadn't quite learned to hide. "You've been different," Daniel said. "Busy," Marcus said. "That's not what I mean." "What do you mean, then?" Daniel set his fork down slowly. "Do you remember when we were 22 and we drove to the coast and the car broke down and we had to sleep in a gas station parking lot? You thought it was the funniest thing that had ever happened to you. You told that story at every party for years." Marcus smiled. "Of course I remember that." But even as the words left his mouth, he felt the edges of it going soft, like paper left in the rain. He could not see the gas station. He could not feel the night air or hear Daniel laughing beside him on the curb. He had the concept of the memory without the memory itself, a frame with no painting inside it. "Marcus," Daniel said quietly. "That was your story. It was yours." "I'm just tired," Marcus said. "I'm fine." He was not tired. He was losing ground, acre by acre, and the ground being lost was himself. But the money kept arriving every midnight like a faithful employee, and when everything is multiplying in one direction, it is very easy to convince yourself that what is draining from the other side is not really gone. Just resting. Just misplaced. The friendship ended without a fight, without a final conversation, without any of the things that endings are supposed to have. Daniel stopped calling and Marcus didn't notice for 3 weeks. When he finally did, he picked up his phone and stared at Daniel's name for a moment and then set it back down to take a meeting. He told himself he would call tomorrow. He did not call tomorrow. The version of Marcus that would have refused to let that friendship go, the one who would have shown up at Daniel's door and said, "I don't know what's happening to me but I don't want to lose you," that version had already been quietly paid out. Already spent. Already gone. At 2 years in, Marcus Hale was worth more money than most governments held in reserve. He sat in boardrooms and said precisely the right things. He signed documents with the composed certainty of a man who had never once doubted himself. He was efficient, formidable, and completely hollow in ways that hadn't yet caught up to his reflection. He stopped dreaming somewhere around this time. Not in the ambitious sense, in the literal one. He would close his eyes and wake 8 hours later with nothing. No images, no residue of another world. Just a clean, empty interval, like a machine that had been switched off and switched back on. He noticed it the way you notice a sound stopping, only in its absence, only after it was already gone. He hired investigators in his 3rd year, telling them only that he wanted to understand the origins of his financial growth. They were thorough. They pulled contracts, traced shell companies, followed the chain of custodial agreements back to the very beginning, and they found a document Marcus had signed before the first midnight ever came. The clause was on page 47. His lead investigator read it to him over the phone in a voice that had gone very careful and very quiet. In exchange for compounding returns, the undersigned consents to the gradual transference of experiential memory to the custodial fund, to be processed as collateral in perpetuity. The line was signed, initialed on every page, in his own hand. Marcus said nothing for a long time after the call ended. Then he opened his laptop and searched his own files. Deep in a folder with no name, he found a video. 3 years old. The man on the screen was him, younger, sitting in the cheap apartment with the parking structure outside the window, speaking directly into the camera with the unhurried calm of someone who has already made their decision and made peace with it. "If you're watching this," past Marcus said, "then it worked. You're rich. You probably don't remember making this choice, that's by design. But I want you to know that I saw it clearly. All of it. I knew exactly what the cost would be and I decided the math made sense." He paused. He looked almost kind. Almost like someone Marcus might have trusted. The memories weren't building anything. The feelings weren't producing anything. The relationships were comfort, not progress. You traded soft things for hard ones. Don't feel bad about it. He looked straight into the camera. Keep going. The video ended. Marcus watched it again. Then a 3rd time. He was searching the face on the screen for something, a crack, a hesitation, some flicker of doubt that had been edited out. There was none. The man in that apartment had known exactly what he was choosing and had chosen it anyway, with both eyes open and a camera running to make sure his future self couldn't pretend otherwise. The clock moved to 11:59. Marcus set the laptop aside. He sat in the enormous silence of his 200-room mansion and looked out at the city below, his city, in every way that money could make something yours, and he waited. Midnight came. The number surged. Somewhere deep in whatever remained of him, in some small and rapidly shrinking room, something that might once have been grief flickered briefly and then went dark. He kept going. And that is the part of this story that should stay with you long after you stop watching. Not the contract, not the twist, not the money. It's this: Marcus Hale was never cursed. There was no villain. No outside force reached into his life and hollowed him out. He did it himself, one midnight at a time, so gradually that he never felt the blade. The version of him that would have mourned his losses was the very first loss he paid. So the question isn't whether you would ever sign something like that. The question is whether the version of you that would, the one that already whispers that feelings are inefficient, that relationships slow you down, that you can always reconnect later, that success comes first and everything else can wait. Whether that version of you is already signing, quietly, in the small choices you make every single day. Because Marcus didn't become a monster. He became the most ruthless version of himself. And he did it so slowly, and so willingly, that he never once had the chance to say goodbye to the man he used to be.